Have you ever wondered what the Indian economy was like before 1991? Let's take a journey back in time to the pre-1991 era. The Indian economy at that time was a closed system. This means that India had limited interactions with other economies around the world. We were like an island, isolated and self-reliant, with a focus on domestic production for domestic consumption. The government had a firm grip on economic activities. It controlled and regulated industries, businesses, and even the prices of goods and services. The intention was noble: to protect our domestic industries from foreign competition and to prevent the exploitation of consumers. But the result? It stifled innovation and efficiency, making our industries uncompetitive on a global scale. And then there was the foreign exchange crisis. India's foreign exchange reserves were dwindling rapidly, to the point where we could barely afford to import essential goods like oil. Why were we in such a dire situation, you ask? Well, we were heavily dependent on imports, especially oil. When oil prices shot up in the international market, our import bills skyrocketed, draining our foreign exchange reserves. Simultaneously, inflation was soaring. Prices of goods and services were rising at an alarming rate, eroding the purchasing power of the common man. And let's not forget about unemployment. With limited job opportunities and a rapidly growing population, unemployment was rife. The economic policies of the time, known as the License Raj, required businesses to obtain numerous licenses and permits to operate. This created a system of red tape and corruption, further hampering economic growth. In short, the Indian economy was in a state of turmoil. We were grappling with a closed economy system, a foreign exchange crisis, high levels of inflation, and widespread unemployment. The economic situation was grim, and India was on the brink of a financial crisis. But as they say, it is often darkest before the dawn. The challenges of the time paved the way for some of the most significant economic reforms in India's history, which we'll delve into in the next scene. But for now, remember, the economic situation was grim and India was on the brink of a financial crisis. So, what led to the birth of the new economic policy? To answer that, we need to take a step back to the late 80s and early 90s. During this time, India was facing a severe economic crisis. A crisis so profound that it threatened the very foundations of the economic system. The country was grappling with a massive fiscal deficit, hyperinflation, and a dwindling foreign exchange reserve. The most alarming of these was the balance of payment crisis. The balance of payment is a record of a country's economic transactions with the rest of the world. It includes the trade of goods, services, and capital. By the end of 1990, India's balance of payment was in a precarious state. The country was virtually bankrupt, with just enough foreign exchange reserves to cover a few weeks of imports. This dire situation led India to knock on the doors of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, for a loan. The IMF agreed to provide the loan, but it was not without conditions. The IMF mandated that India must liberalize its economy. This meant that India had to reduce government control over the economy, encourage private enterprise, and open up to foreign investments. These conditions were not easy to accept for a country that had followed a socialist economic model since independence. The government was hesitant, but the severity of the crisis left them with little choice. The decision to accept the IMF's conditions was one of the most controversial and debated decisions in India's economic history. So in 1991, the Indian government introduced the new economic policy. This policy marked a radical shift from the previous economic approach. It was a move towards a more open and market-oriented economy. The new economic policy was not just a policy, it was a commitment to a new economic philosophy. The economic crisis was the catalyst for the Indian government to launch the new economic policy. The crisis forced the country to rethink its economic strategy and embrace a new path, a path that would eventually lead to a significant transformation of the Indian economy. Output: what changes did the new economic policy bring? The new economic policy, or NEP, introduced in India in 1991, was a watershed moment for the Indian economy. It brought about a significant shift in India's economic strategy, moving away from socialist-inspired policies of self-reliance and state control towards a more market-oriented approach. The first key reform was liberalization. This involved reducing government regulations and restrictions on economic activity. Industrial licensing was abolished for most industries, except for a few areas like defense and atomic energy. This move opened up the Indian market, encouraging competition and innovation. Next came privatization. The government started to disinvest from a number of public sector industries, allowing private players to enter these sectors. This not only led to increased efficiency and productivity, but also helped the government in reducing its fiscal deficit. The third pillar of the new economic policy was globalization. India opened its doors to foreign investment, leading to a surge in foreign capital inflow. This was a major step in integrating the Indian economy with the global economy. It not only brought in much-needed foreign exchange, but also led to the transfer of technology and skills. However, it's important to note that these changes did not occur overnight. They were implemented gradually over a period of time. Each step was carefully planned and executed, with the government ensuring that the transition was as smooth as possible. These reforms collectively transformed the Indian economy from a closed, regulated system to an open, market-driven one. It provided a much-needed boost to the economy, paving the way for the rapid economic growth that India witnessed in the years that followed. In conclusion, the new economic policy was a turning point in India's economic history. It marked the beginning of a new era, an era characterized by economic liberalization, privatization, and globalization. The new economic policy initiated a paradigm shift in the Indian economy. The new economic policy brought significant changes, but what was the impact? The new economic policy, implemented in 1991, had a profound effect on the Indian economy. One of its most significant impacts was the steady growth in the gross domestic product, or GDP. Before the policy was introduced, the economy was in a dire state with minimal growth. However, post the policy's implementation, the economy started to recover, and we saw a steady increase in GDP. This growth was a clear sign that the economy was on a path of recovery and development. The new economic policy also marked a significant increase in foreign investments. Prior to 1991, foreign investments in India were minimal, mainly due to restrictive government policies. However, with the liberalization of the economy, foreign companies started investing in India, bringing in much-needed capital and technology. This influx of foreign investments not only boosted the economy, but also led to the creation of numerous jobs, contributing to the overall development of the country. Let's not forget the transformation in the industrial sector. With the abolition of licenses required for setting up industries and the end of the monopoly of public sector in many industries, private players were encouraged to set up industries. This led to a surge in industrial growth, contributing to the overall growth of the economy. Finally, perhaps the most significant impact of the new economic policy was the shift towards a market-based economy. The control of the government over the economy was reduced, and market forces of demand and supply started playing a major role. This shift not only increased competition, but also improved the quality and variety of goods and services available to the consumers. The new economic policy transformed the Indian economy, paving the way for the country's economic growth. The policy's impact was far-reaching, changing the face of the Indian economy and setting it on a path towards becoming one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. Let's recap the journey of the Indian economy from pre-1991 to the implementation of the new economic policy. We started with a snapshot of the Indian economy before 1991, where we saw an economy that was heavily regulated and struggling under the weight of its own inefficiencies. From there, we moved to the lead-up to the new economic policy, a time of crisis that demanded bold action and a radical shift in economic thinking. The implementation of the new economic policy marked a significant turning point. India opened its doors to global markets, liberalized its industries, and welcomed foreign direct investment. The impact of these reforms has been transformative. The Indian economy has seen steady growth, improved living standards, and the emergence of a vibrant middle class. The journey of the Indian economy from a closed system to an open market economy is a testament to the power of economic reform.